Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And leave a comment with where you are from and what time you are watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. And now, let's begin. Long before our own voices echoed across valleys, before we marked our borders with fences or maps, another creature ruled the night with a language far older than ours. The direwolf, larger than any wolf alive today, left behind not just bones in tar pits and caves, but whispers, fragments of how they spoke to one another, how they declared what was theirs, and how they wove survival into the fabric of sound, scent, and silent ritual. How did they speak across the darkness, across forests where the trees stood like watchmen? What did it mean to live by laws written not on parchment, but in the very air, etched in howls, marked by paw, and sealed with the musk of dominance? To imagine this, we must step into the shadows of their world. The direwolf's howl was not just noise. It was the bridge between distance and nearness, the invisible thread binding the pack together. Deep, resonant, and carrying far into the night, their voices rolled like thunder over open plains and trembled like a low drumbeat through canyon stone. A howl was not a single thing. It was a greeting, a warning, a beacon, a test. One sound might tell a wandering pup, stay close. Another might warn strangers, do not cross this line. Travelers who lived close to the land spoke of these howls in reverent tones. To them, the direwolf's call sounded like something between music and mourning. In frozen nights, when firelight felt too small against the vast dark, the sound of a pack communicating across the ridges could raise the hairs on a man's arms. It was more than fear, it was recognition of an intelligence moving just beyond reach. Territory, for the direwolf, was life itself. Not a matter of pride, but survival. Prey herds migrated across wide ranges, and water shifted with the seasons. A pack's boundaries were living things, bending and stretching as scarcity demanded, but always defended. To step into another pack's range uninvited was to test the limits of tooth and bone. Their borders were written not in lines, but in layers of scent. A direwolf would press its body against a tree, leaving musk that clung to bark and lingered for days. They would urinate along trails, a pungent map that spoke with more clarity than words. This is ours. Imagine walking through a silent forest where the very air was painted with invisible warnings, pungent markers hanging like unseen banners. Those who could smell them understood the message. Those who could not were blind trespassers. People, too, learned to read these signs. Early hunters tracking elk or bison would sometimes stumble into a territory claimed by direwolves. The stench on the wind was sharp, almost bitter, like iron and musk combined. They knew then that they were not alone. A broken branch, a paw print sunk deep in mud, a strange hush in the forest, each detail added to the tension. The hunters would whisper among themselves, debating whether to push onward or retreat. Some prayed aloud, offering apologies into the air, believing the direwolves could hear. The relationship between humans and these great predators was always double-edged. There was admiration, for direwolves embodied loyalty, strength, and the unyielding order of the wild. But there was also dread, for to cross their invisible lines could mean never returning. Legends grew from these encounters. Around campfires, elders told of direwolves who spoke in dreams, warning trespassers to turn back. They told of hunters who ignored the warnings, only to vanish, their bones later found gnawed and scattered. In these stories, the howl was not just a sound, it was a spell, a voice that bound the land itself. Within the pack, communication was even more intricate. The direwolf's size meant their hierarchy was fierce, their need for order absolute. A dominant pair often led, their authority enforced not just by strength, but by ritual. A nip to the muzzle, a lowering of the body, a wag of the tail. These were gestures that carried weight, as binding as any decree. When disputes rose, they were settled with ceremony, not chaos. Teeth bared, growls vibrating like the rumble of a storm, but rarely spilling into fatal combat. The pack could not afford civil war. Unity was their survival. To see such a pack at rest was to witness quiet conversation without words. Pups gnawed on bones under watchful eyes. Subordinates pressed their flanks against the alpha pair, seeking favor and safety. A soft whimper meant hunger. A sharp bark meant play. Their lives were a chorus of small sounds and touches, weaving bonds tighter than rope. For the humans who lived near them, these behaviors were lessons. Some tribes believed direwolves taught them the value of family. They saw how the pack cared for its weakest, how a wounded wolf was not abandoned but protected. Hunters mirrored this loyalty, refusing to leave their own behind. Others took inspiration from the direwolves' territorial discipline. Just as the wolves patrolled their ranges, people began marking their lands with stones, carvings, or fire pits. It was a dialogue of imitation, a silent exchange of ideas between species. And yet, fear lingered. The scent of direwolves could sour a man's stomach, their howl could unsettle his dreams. Imagine being alone in the forest when the wind shifts, carrying that musky weight. The air thickens, heavy as damp leather, and every sound becomes sharper. The crack of a twig, the rush of water, even the beating of your own heart. You taste it too, bitter on your tongue, like the residue of charred wood. Your body knows what your mind struggles to admit. You have crossed into a realm where you do not belong. Sometimes people tried to negotiate with this unseen presence. Offerings were left at the edge of hunting grounds, meat, carved tokens, even blood pricked from a hunter's own hand. The hope was simple, that the direwolves would understand, would spare them passage. Whether it worked or not is a mystery, but the ritual itself reveals the weight these animals carried in human thought. There is a psychology in territory that binds all creatures, and the direwolf embodied it with clarity. To defend one's ground is to defend one's story. Territory is memory, where the pack hunted last winter, where pups took their first breath, where bones of ancestors lie buried. To lose it is not just to starve, but to vanish from the lineage of the land. Humans, too, felt this instinct. Villages defended their fields not only for food, but for the meaning tied to the soil. In this way, direwolf and human were mirrors of each other, shadows overlapping. The sounds of their presence were unforgettable. Close your eyes and hear it, a deep growl rolling like stones down a hillside, vibrating in your chest. The snap of jaws shutting on a bone, echoing sharp in the night. The thud of paws hitting packed earth, heavy certain. Even the silence carried weight, the absence of bird calls, the sudden hush of crickets when direwolves passed by. Silence, too, was a language. Their smell lingered long after they were gone. Musky, earthy, tinged with the iron salt of blood. Hunters said they could tell when direwolves had fed nearby because the air tasted of marrow, thick and almost sweet. Scavengers avoided these places, knowing too well the danger of stealing from such predators. And yet, despite their ferocity, there was beauty in their presence. When the moon hung bright, silvering the grasslands, a pack's howl would rise in harmony. It was not a chaotic noise, but layered, each voice finding its place. One low, one high, one wavering like a flute. Together they painted the night with sound, as though they were stitching their claim across the sky itself. Those who heard it never forgot. Some swore it was music older than humanity. As centuries turned, the direwolves disappeared, their voices fading into silence. Climate shifted, prey herds dwindled, and competition from smaller, quicker wolves pressed them into extinction. But their echoes did not vanish entirely. Stories remained, bones remained, and somewhere deep in us, the memory of their order, their communication, their fierce guardianship of home, remained. Even today, when a modern wolf howls under the stars, something stirs in the human heart. We hear not just the living animal, but the ghost of its ancestor. We imagine vast ranges, hidden trails marked by scent, invisible borders upheld by loyalty and tooth. We feel again the pulse of what it meant to share the earth with such creatures, to walk in their shadow. The mystery that began with their howls still lingers. Were they warning us? Teaching us? Or simply living by the same law that binds all creatures? Survive, protect, endure? The answer is not a single word but a chorus, layered like their voices, carrying far into the night. And so the story continues, not as bones and tar, not as vanished shadows, but as something that moves through us still. In our need to belong, in our instinct to mark what is ours, in the way we listen to silence and hear meaning, the direwolf lives on. Their communication was not just theirs. It was a fragment of the earth's own language, one we still strain to understand whenever the wind shifts, whenever the night grows quiet, whenever the distant sound of a wolf reminds us that once, long ago, we were not the only ones to speak. What if the shadows of prehistory still lingered at the edges of our forests? What if, on a moonlit night, you caught the faint outline of a creature too large, too powerful, to be any ordinary wolf? The thought alone carries a chill, doesn't it? For thousands of years, human beings whispered such stories around firelight, and often, those whispers circled back to a single, haunting presence, the direwolf. Picture yourself in a world before the comfort of houses, before the certainty of light switches and locked doors. The earth is cold, heavy with ice, and the air itself seems sharpened by hunger. The horizon is never quiet. Mammoths move like mountains on legs, their tusks sweeping arcs through the dim light. Saber-toothed cats stalk the low grass, eyes catching the fire glow. And there, padding through snow crust, come the direwolves. Their paws sink deep, their shoulders roll with the power of an animal built for endurance. They are larger than any wolf you have ever seen, jaws broad, teeth made to crush bone, eyes burning with the need to survive. Scientists who unearthed their bones tell us that a direwolf could weigh well over 150 pounds, some nearing 175. Heavy as a man, but moving on four legs with the silent grace of a predator honed by millennia. Their skulls were broad, their muzzles shorter than those of modern wolves, giving them a bite that could snap through the femur of a bison as if it were dry wood. You can almost hear the sound, that brittle crack of marrow giving way, followed by the wet silence as the pack feeds. But size alone does not capture the truth of them. Their strength was not only muscle and bone, it was survival itself. Imagine the sheer will it took to endure the Ice Age. The direwolf's coat, thick with insulating fur, trapped heat close to its body. Its lungs, vast and efficient, drew in the frozen air and made fire from breath. Its teeth were not just weapons but tools, splitting carcasses open to reach the rich, fatty marrow that meant the difference between life and starvation. For us, watching from a distance, there would have been all tangled with fear. The people of that age did not write their thoughts, but they painted animals on cave walls, and in their charcoal, ochre, and blood you can almost feel what these creatures meant. A direwolf was both enemy and ally in the human mind. Enemy, because it could kill you in the dark. Ally, because it hunted the same prey you did, proving that life could be taken from the wild even in such a brutal age. Close your eyes and imagine standing in that silence after a snowfall, when every sound carries twice as far. The crunch beneath your boots, the steam of your breath, then a sound not close, not far, low, rhythmic, traveling through the trees. A howl, fuller and deeper than anything alive today. One voice, then another, rising together into the air until it becomes a single wall of sound. Your skin prickles, your heart pounds. You are hearing not just animals, but the very spirit of survival singing through the night. When people first encountered them, survival meant balance. You could not simply fight a direwolf pack head-on, any more than you could wrestle a storm. So humans adapted. They learned to build fires not only for warmth, but as a shield against the eyes that glowed at the forest edge. They carved spears tipped with stone to keep the distance between themselves and the snapping jaws. They worked in groups, just as the direwolves did, knowing that alone, one human was nothing but prey. The direwolves themselves lived by rules as strict and unwritten as our own. They were not solitary beasts but pack hunters. Think of the coordination it must have taken, flanking prey from both sides, pushing it toward waiting jaws, striking not when the herd was strong, but when the old and the weak faltered. They thrived on unity, their survival braided into the bond between one wolf and another. Perhaps that is what stirred human imagination most. They were like us, and yet utterly beyond us. To stand in the presence of a direwolf was to feel something larger than fear. It was to brush against the edge of myth. Their size was not simply measured in pounds or inches, but in the way they filled the imagination. For some, they were omens of death. For others, spirits of the wild. Think of the way breath catches when you hear a wolf's howl even today. Now deepen that sound, lengthen the shadow, and imagine what our ancestors felt as they huddled by the fire, listening to voices from the frozen dark. The senses tell this story best. Sight first. The direwolf's body low, powerful, its fur mottled to blend with snow and rock, eyes yellow or amber against the night. Then sound. The muffled rhythm of paws on packed earth, the sudden crack of bone between its teeth. Touch. The brush of cold wind against your cheek, and beneath it, the imagined weight of fur thick as a rug, muscles shifting like ropes beneath the skin. Smell. The iron tang of blood in the snow, sharp against the clean air of winter. Taste. Bitter smoke from your fire mingling with the rich fat of venison, stolen and eaten quickly, because you know the pack is near. Cultures that came long after the direwolves still carried their memory, even if they did not know it. Stories of great wolves who guarded the underworld, of wolf spirits that guided warriors, of creatures larger and darker than any common animal. In Norse myths, Fenrir, the giant wolf, threatens to devour the sun. In native tales, wolves appear as teachers and companions, bridging the human and the wild. Perhaps the echo of direwolves still lived in those stories, a faint memory of something too immense to forget. Yet strength, no matter how great, does not promise eternity. The direwolves thrived for hundreds of thousands of years, but as the world warmed, their advantage faded. Their prey, giant horses, camels, ground sloths, and mammoths, began to disappear. The smaller, quicker gray wolf survived by adapting, shifting its diet, changing its hunting style. The direwolf, too specialized, too large, could not bend to the new rules of survival. Imagine the quiet grief of watching them fade, their howls growing fewer, their tracks disappearing from the snow. By the time humans were building civilizations, the direwolf was gone, leaving only bones locked in tar and stone. And yet, they are not gone from us. Their bones tell their strength, their skulls tell their bite, their teeth hold the wear of endless winters. But more than that, their spirit lingers in us. The fear and wonder they inspired shaped the way we saw the wilderness. Their shadow stretches into our stories, our symbols, our very sense of what it means to face the dark unknown. Close your eyes again. Picture yourself not in the Ice Age, but in the present. You stand at the edge of a forest, maybe in the Appalachians, maybe the Rockies, maybe some quiet stretch of woodland near your own home. The night is still, and then, faint, far off, you hear the howl of a wolf. It is not a direwolf, no, but in that moment, a sliver of the old memory stirs. The hair on your neck rises, your chest tightens, and you feel what your ancestors felt, that you are not alone, that something older and stronger walks the earth beside you. We measure the direwolf in size and strength, numbers, weights, lengths of bone, but survival is more than statistics. It is the story of how a creature lives in the imagination long after it has vanished. It is the smell of smoke in your nostrils, the flash of teeth in firelight, the echo of a howl rolling across an empty valley. It is knowing that we too are animals who once huddled against the same cold, listening for the same sound in the night. And so the direwolf endures, not in flesh, but in memory, in myth, in the lingering feeling that something immense and watchful still waits just beyond the fire's reach. What does it mean to live in the shadow of teeth sharper than any blade, bound together by blood, hunger, and the pull of an ancient moon? The question lingers like smoke in the cold air, a mystery as old as the direwolf itself. To understand it is to step into a world where survival was not a solitary act, but a song sung by many voices, where the rhythm of life and death pulsed through the very marrow of a pack. The direwolf, larger and heavier than any wolf alive today, once roamed the great plains and forests of the Americas. They were not lone wanderers but creatures of kinship, organized in hierarchies so strict, so finely woven, that to break them meant ruin. And so, when one imagines the direwolf, one must not picture merely the beast with broad skull and crushing jaws, but the invisible net of power, loyalty, and fear that held each member of the pack in place. It began with the alpha pair, though the word alpha is a modern simplification of something far more intricate. These were not tyrants, nor were they always the largest. They were leaders because the others allowed it, because their presence carried the gravity of experience. Picture them, fur thick with winter frost, eyes glinting amber in the dusk, voices that rose in the long howl to gather the family together. Around them swirled the younger hunters, the guardians, the cautious scouts, the subordinate pairings who waited their turn for dominance or acceptance. At the bottom lingered the omegas, thin and scarred, mocked by some, yet strangely vital. Even they had their place. The structure of a direwolf pack was not invented by humans, yet humans watched it closely. Ancient peoples, who crossed icy valleys and hunted along the same game trails, observed the direwolf as both rival and teacher. They saw how order was maintained without constant bloodshed, how disputes were resolved by posture, by the lift of a tail, the baring of teeth, the weight of silence more than the strike of claw. This was something humans understood, because they too relied on hierarchy, on chiefs, on elders, on those who stood taller in the firelight. But what did it feel like inside such a hierarchy? Imagine the weight of it pressing down like snow on branches. For the beta, every glance toward the alpha was charged with tension, an unspoken question. Am I loyal, or am I waiting? The younger wolves tasted the metallic tang of restraint in their mouths, for to challenge too soon was to risk exile or death. And the omegas, though mocked and starved, learned to savor scraps, the marrow-rich bones left after the feast. Hunger, after all, had its own flavor, sharp and unforgettable. Their voices filled the night, a chorus of howls layered upon one another, high keening threads woven with the deep rumble of the dominant pair. For those who lived alongside them, the sound was both terrifying and strangely beautiful. It carried through the valleys like a storm, rolling across the frozen earth, making the hairs rise on human arms. To listen was to feel the unity of the pack, each voice distinct, yet none alone. The sound told the world, "We are many, we are bound, we are not to be challenged." There is a story told in fragments across cultures that the direwolf pack mirrored human tribes so closely that some believed the two were kin. Around fires, people spoke of wolves as brothers. They noticed how pups were guarded fiercely, how food was shared according to rank, how discipline was harsh but never meaningless. And so, humans carved the likeness of wolves into bone and stone. They painted them on cave walls with ochre and ash, not just as hunters, but as symbols of loyalty and leadership. To carry the image of a wolf was to invoke strength of family, to remind oneself that even the sharpest tooth meant little if it snapped alone. The hierarchy, however, was not static. Like rivers, it shifted with time. An aging alpha, once unstoppable, might limp after a wound. Younger wolves would circle, ears forward, shoulders tense. The air itself would thicken, filled with the musk of challenge. One bite, two, the clash brief yet brutal. Blood in the snow, steaming in the cold. The victor would shake out his fur, tail high, while the others lowered their heads in submission. Such changes rippled through the entire pack, unsettling the order, forcing every wolf to redefine its place. The humans who saw this learned something essential. That power is always temporary, that leadership must be proven again and again. The senses tell the deeper truth. To walk among direwolves, even in the imagination, is to smell the iron scent of fresh kill mixed with the sour musk of bodies pressed close for warmth. It is to see amber eyes glinting out of the tree line, pupils wide with hunger. It is to hear paws crunching in rhythm on the frost, a sound like the steady beating of a drum. To touch their fur in a dream is to feel coarseness layered over soft undercoat, warm with life. And perhaps the most haunting, to taste the air after a hunt, heavy with blood and smoke from distant fires, reminding both wolf and human that survival was a feast never guaranteed. Over time, direwolves vanished. The last of them left their bones in tar pits, in riverbeds, in caves hidden beneath roots. Yet the memory of their hierarchy lived on. Human cultures carried forward the image of the wolf pack, turning it into metaphor. Leaders spoke of wolf-like unity, of the strength of brothers standing shoulder to shoulder. Warriors painted snarling muzzles on their shields. Storytellers whispered of lone wolves, though in truth such creatures rarely lived long. It was the pack, the net of roles, the balance of dominance and submission, that gave the direwolf its might. And here lies the deeper mystery. Why does the idea still haunt us? Why do we look at wolves today, smaller cousins of those extinct giants, and see ourselves reflected? Perhaps because human societies, too, are built upon invisible ladders. We know the feel of hierarchy in our bones. We know what it is to bow our heads, to step aside, to wait for scraps. We know, too, the thrill of challenge, the surge of blood when we rise against those who stand above. Close your eyes and imagine standing at the edge of an ancient forest. The snow is deep, the stars so sharp they seem to cut the sky. Somewhere in the distance, a pack of direwolves stirs. You hear their breath before their bodies appear, steam rising like ghosts. The alpha moves first, slow, deliberate, and the others follow in perfect silence. Not a sound wasted. Their eyes sweep across the dark, every sense sharpened by hunger. You feel the weight of their order, the unspoken rules that bind them tighter than ropes. You realize that if one were to falter, the whole would suffer. Humans understood this instinctively. They mimicked the direwolf's unity in battle, in migration, in ritual. The pack became a lesson etched into the human story. Strength lies not in chaos, but in harmony. And yet, harmony is never soft. It is forged in the clash of wills, in the sting of loss, in the silence of submission. The direwolf taught this lesson without words, only with presence. Even today, in quiet moments, the echoes remain. When we speak of packs of friends, of families bound by loyalty, of leaders who must prove themselves or be cast down, we are repeating lessons first written in blood and snow by creatures long gone. When a wolf's howl carries across a winter field, it is not just a sound but a memory, of order, of hierarchy, of a world where survival depended on knowing your place, and respecting it until the time came to challenge it. The direwolf is gone, yet it lingers in bone and dream. The hierarchy it lived by still pulses quietly beneath human skin. To study it is not just to look backward, but to recognize something still alive in us. The need for family, the struggle for power, the longing to belong. One can almost hear them still, moving through the dark, breath clouding, paws drumming, voices lifting into the sky. The pack remains, even if the bodies are dust. How did the direwolves feed? and what secret laws guided them as they tore into their kill beneath the darkened sky. It is a question that has lingered through the bones left behind, through the fossilized teeth still locked in old wounds, through the silent shadows that wander in our stories. To imagine their feeding is to step into a world half wild, half remembered, where hunger was not just need but ritual, where survival carried the scent of blood and the whisper of breath on a cold night. Picture a frozen plain, the air so sharp it cuts at the lungs, the moon casting a pale silver sheen across the land. The herd, massive bison, towering ground sloths, or perhaps a young mastodon, has been brought low. The chase is over. The silence afterward is eerie, broken only by the ragged panting of wolves that are not wolves as we know them. These direwolves are broader of chest, heavier of jaw, their eyes reflecting firelight though no fire burns. They gather around the fallen beast, not in chaos, but in an order that is difficult to see at first, an order buried deep in instinct. The first to approach is the leader, not always the strongest, but the one who carries the confidence of command. He steps forward, his paws pressing into the frosted ground, muzzle brushing against the still warm hide. He does not rush. He waits, as if granting time for the spirit of the fallen to pass, as if acknowledging that what lay before them was once alive, strong, and free. The others circle, restless, muscles trembling with hunger, but they hold back. There is discipline even in desperation. When teeth finally sink into flesh, the sound is not only of tearing, but of history being written. The hide stretches, snaps, releases. Warmth rises from the open body, steam mingling with the cold night, carrying with it a smell thick with iron and salt. The leader feeds first, but not for long. His duty is not only to eat, but to allow. He pulls a strip of flesh, swallows it almost whole, and then steps aside. That gesture, simple, animal, yet profound, sets the rhythm for the rest. One by one, the direwolves move in. Their tongues lap at the blood that pools dark against the snow. They tear muscle from bone, noses smeared, whiskers trembling. Each bite is both savage and tender, for this is how their lives continue, how the pack remains more than just scattered beasts. They do not fight endlessly for position. They know somehow that the strength of all depends on the strength of each. The mother with swollen teats will take her share, knowing it will soon turn into milk for hidden pups. The yearlings, not yet full grown, tug eagerly at tendons, their sharp cries carried into the air. Even the old, the ones whose teeth are worn to stubs, are given space to nose into softer places, savoring marrow and fat. It was not so different from the way human tribes of the Ice Age gathered around their own hunts. People, too, had their order, their rules for who ate first, who ate last. Just as the direwolves gave to the pups and the elders, so did human bands feed children, and the aged with care. The reflection between beast and man is striking. Both understood that the kill was not just food, but a bond. A pack without fairness weakens. A tribe without sharing breaks apart. The act of feeding carried meaning beyond meat. For the direwolf, the steaming entrails were not just organs. They were life passed from one creature to another. The liver, rich and dense, was prized, and perhaps even the animals felt its potency. The bones cracked open with heavy jaws, marrow sucked with the deep satisfaction of nourishment hard won. The smell was overwhelming, a mix of musk, fur, and the metallic tang of blood that clung to the breath long after the eating was done. Snow-stained red, paws sticky, the night filled with crunch and grunt, and the low growl of pleasure. And in that moment, their world was complete. Hunger answered. Order kept. The dead honored in the only way predators know, through use, through nothing wasted. Even the hide, gnawed and tugged, carried fragments of fat that the direwolves savored. The tendons were chewed, swallowed, digested into strength that would fuel another chase. When they left, little remained but bones scattered like ancient runes across the frozen earth. For humans who later uncovered those bones, the story seemed brutal. Yet look closer, and there is grace. To feed this way was to understand that survival is a circle, that no creature feeds alone. The direwolves' jaws were larger, yes, but their instincts were not so far from our own ancestors. Both species carved meaning from scarcity. Both learned that to share was to endure. Imagine standing there as an unseen witness. The sight would chill and mesmerize all at once. Dark shapes moving in rhythm, their shoulders rising and falling like shadows made flesh. The sound of bones splitting would echo in the chest, a deep reminder of fragility. The heat from the open body would fog the air, touching your face with a damp warmth even as your fingers froze in the night. If you dared step closer, you would smell the musk of wolf tangled with the copper scent of spilled blood. a perfume of wildness. If impossibly you tasted it, you would know salt, iron, fat, and smoke all at once, the taste of life transforming into life. Culturally, the image of the direwolf feeding has clung to human imagination. They became symbols of loyalty, of ferocity, of the balance between hunger and restraint. Myths whispered of wolves who guided the souls of the dead, who taught men to honor the hunt and not to waste. To watch them feed was to see that balance embodied, the savage bite softened by the pause, the growl tempered by the gift of letting another eat. Even the act of standing guard, while some fed, others lifted their heads, ears pricked, eyes scanning, spoke of devotion not just to self but to the whole. Psychologically, the feeding shaped the pack's sense of belonging. To eat together is to bind together. Hunger isolated is torment. Hunger shared becomes story. Each direwolf, bloodied muzzle pressed close to its kin, came away not only fuller in belly but deeper in trust. Perhaps this is why humans, too, find ritual in eating together, from fireside meals to great feasts. The echoes run deep, back to when we watched such creatures feed and felt the pull of kinship. There was danger, of course. A kill always drew more than the hunters. Ravens would gather, their cries sharp and mocking. Saber-tooths lingered on the edges, muscles coiled, ready to steal. Even smaller wolves, those that would one day outlast the direwolves, circled with sly patience. Yet in feeding, the direwolves stood as one. Their collective snarls sent challengers back into shadow. Only after they had taken their share, after bellies swelled and legs stiffened, would they step aside and let the scavengers pick over what little remained. This cycle, the hunt, the feeding, the sharing, the leaving, shaped the land. Carcasses enriched the soil, bones offered shelter to insects and birds, blood fed the snow with stories only time could read. In this way, the direwolves did not just feed themselves, they fed the world around them. And perhaps that too is why their memory lingers. They were part of a larger order, one that included humans, prey, scavengers, even the earth itself. Now, when we sit at a table or pass food hand to hand, we echo that ancient circle. We may not hear the crunch of bone or taste the raw warmth of a kill, but the act of sharing remains sacred. The direwolves remind us that feeding is never just about filling the stomach. It is about trust, survival, belonging. It is about giving space for another to eat, knowing the strength of the group is built in that small moment of grace. Their feeding was both fierce and gentle, both savage and solemn. And though they are gone, their memory lingers in fossils, in story, in the way we too look at food not just as fuel but as communion. Somewhere in the marrow of our bones, we remember the sight of blood steaming in snow, the sound of teeth working in rhythm, the smell of life given and life sustained. We remember, even if we do not know we remember, that once we learned how to feed by watching them. Imagine the night sky stretched wide over an ancient plain, the stars burning like pale embers above a land not yet tamed by human hands. The grass whispers with the wind, shadows ripple across the earth, and the ground itself feels alive, as though it knows what is coming. The question rises quietly like smoke. When a direwolf pack gave chase, how did each wolf know its place? Was it instinct, or was it something more, an inheritance of purpose carried in the blood of those beasts? The chase was never chaos. To the untrained eye it might have looked like wild frenzy, teeth bared, legs pumping, prey fleeing with desperate leaps. But to those who watched closely, who listened not just with the ear but with the spirit, there was rhythm in the movement. A song played across the land, and every direwolf had a part to sing. Their roles were etched not by chance but by design, as old as the mountains, as steady as the rivers cutting through stone. The lead was never the strongest. It was the keenest. The wolf with the sharpest sense of where the herd would turn, where weakness showed itself, where dust told secrets in the moonlight. Its eyes did not blink at the flurry of hooves. It followed the smallest tremor in the earth, the faintest twist in muscle beneath hide. It was the one who read the story of the hunt before it unfolded. When it surged forward, the others answered, falling into line as if tethered by invisible threads. On either side came the flankers, guardians of momentum. Their task was not to strike, but to bend. With silent coordination, they pressed the prey inward, cutting off escapes, guiding the quarry into a corridor of dread. They were shadows at the edge of sight, seen too late by the hunted, always there where freedom seemed possible. Their paws struck earth in unison, the thud like a heartbeat, steady, unstoppable. Behind them ran the sweepers, wolves whose strength lay in endurance. They were the tide that never receded, closing gaps, holding pressure, never letting panic scatter the herd too wide. They were not the first to taste blood, but without them, the chase unraveled. They carried the patience of stone, knowing their moment would come only when all others had played their part. Their breath steamed in the night, hot against the cold air, each exhale a drumbeat marking the passage of pursuit. Then there was the anchor, the great wolf at the rear. It did not rush. It did not strain. It was the guardian of the hunt itself, ensuring no straggler escaped, no weakness in formation broke their unity. Some said this wolf bore the weight of memory, that its eyes saw not only the present quarry, but every chase that had come before. Its growl was a reminder. The hunt was not mere survival, but tradition, a dance of the living echoing those long gone. And finally, the strike belonged to the cutters, the wolves chosen to end the story. They were not always the largest, nor the fastest, but their timing was perfect. They slipped into the path of exhaustion, where the prey stumbled, where its breath caught like fire in its chest, where fear hollowed out its strength. With precision, with terrifying grace, they brought the hunt to its conclusion. Their teeth met flesh not in rage but in fulfillment, as though the earth itself had guided them to that moment. Humans who lived alongside these creatures learned to see the wisdom in this order. Hunters watched direwolves from afar, studying their methods, copying their formations. In time, human bands too began to chase with roles, scouts, flankers, anchors. They found that survival was not in one person's strength, but in many woven together, each carrying a part of the weight. The direwolf had taught them, though it never meant to teach. It simply was, and in its being, it revealed truths older than speech. There were whispers, passed down in stories by firelight, that the roles in a hunt mirrored roles in life. The leader's task was vision, the flankers was protection, the sweepers was patience, the anchors was memory, the cutters was courage. A child listening to these tales might wonder, what role am I destined to play? Elders answered not with certainty, but with a smile. For the pack was whole only when all roles lived within it. A people without leaders stumbled. A people without protectors broke apart. A people without patience withered. A people without memory forgot themselves. A people without courage died. Imagine the senses stirred in such a chase. The sight first, grass blades bending beneath heavy bodies, sparks of dust rising where hooves struck, pale light glinting in the whites of terrified eyes. The sound followed, the thunder of feet, the rhythm of panting lungs, the sharp snap of branches breaking beneath fleeing weight, the sudden crack of a deer's hoof slipping on stone. Smell filled the air too, iron of blood faint on the breeze from a scraped flank, musk of sweat pouring from prey, the pungent scent of crushed earth, raw and torn by claws. Touch came as vibration in the ground, a trembling that crept up through the soles of one's feet, rattling bone and marrow alike. Even taste lingered on the tongue, dust, salt, the metallic tang of anticipation, fear itself distilled into something almost tangible. To witness such a scene was to feel small, yet also to feel deeply part of the living world. Hunters returned to their camps carrying more than meat. They carried the echo of the chase, the lesson of roles balanced in harmony. Around fires, they retold what they had seen. Children closed their eyes and imagined themselves as direwolves, racing, pressing, enduring, striking. The stories became a kind of lullaby, a reminder that though the world was cruel, it also carried a hidden order. And yet, the direwolf was not eternal. Time shifted, climates changed, and prey grew scarce. The great packs that once thundered across valleys grew fewer, then vanished. What remained were the bones in tar pits, the skulls with their broad jaws and teeth like curved daggers. But bones do not carry sound. Bones do not tell of the order of the chase. Only memory carried that. Only story. Only the soft murmur of a grandfather telling a child, "This is how the direwolves lived, and this is how we too must live." Even now, long after the direwolf's shadow has left the earth, we feel the echo of its chase in ways we cannot always name. A team moving as one on the field. A family working together to face hardship. Friends carrying each other through struggle. Each person a piece of a greater rhythm, each role essential, none greater than the whole. We taste the dust of that old plain without realizing it, hear the faint thrum of paws in the beat of our own hearts. Perhaps that is the true role of each direwolf in the chase, not only to bring down prey, but to leave behind a pattern woven into the marrow of life itself. A reminder that strength is not solitary, that survival is not selfish, that beauty lives in the way many move as one. The wind across the field still carries it, if you pause and listen. The grass still leans as though pressed by their passage. And in dreams, when we run through shadowed lands with others at our side, some part of us knows we are remembering the chase. What is it about the direwolf that still clings to the edges of our imagination, long after its bones sank into the soil of forgotten ages? Was it simply a beast larger than the wolves we know today, or something greater, something that brushed against human memory and left an impression too deep to ever fully fade? Perhaps it is not the size of their teeth or the heaviness of their jaws that haunts us, but the mystery of how they moved together, bound not only by blood but by something older, more primal, the making and keeping of the pack. When the wind curls through an empty canyon or a northern forest in winter, carrying the sharp scent of pine and snow, it is easy to believe the echo of their paws is still there. You can almost hear it, the soft thud of heavy bodies, the synchronized rhythm of predators who knew each other, as well as brothers and sisters know the sound of a shared heartbeat. To understand how direwolves formed their packs is to trace not only the ways of beasts, but the ways of survival, kinship, and the stories humans told around firelight when shadows stretched too long to ignore. Imagine a world, tens of thousands of years ago, when ice pushed down from the north like a great slow tide. The nights were longer, the cold sharper, the prey enormous. Bison with horns as wide as a doorway, horses that ran in vast herds, ground sloths that moved with lumbering patience. The direwolf was not the largest predator on that stage. Saber-toothed cats stalked with their dagger-like fangs. Short-faced bears towered with strength enough to scatter any rival. Yet, the direwolf endured for millennia because of something different, something woven into its nature. It did not move alone. Archaeologists piecing together skulls and teeth from tar pits and cave floors see the evidence clearly. Cracks healed over, bones mended with time, teeth worn down in ways that suggest an animal lived far longer than it could have if left alone after an injury. These signs whisper of care, of companions who did not abandon the wounded but stayed, shared kills, guarded the weak until they could stand again. And from that rises the image of the pack, not only as a hunting machine, but as a family stitched together by loyalty. For humans who watched from the margins, huddled in hides, clutching stone tools, the sight must have stirred something. They too survived by banding together, by keeping the fragile thread of community taut against the pull of hunger and cold. The direwolf pack mirrored them, or perhaps humans mirrored the direwolf. Both learned the same truth. One alone is vulnerable, many together endure. Picture them moving across frozen earth, their coats thick and coarse, colored in shades of smoke and earth, eyes reflecting firelight gold. The sound of them approaches before they are seen, the crunch of frost under wide paws, the low chorus of growls that ripple through the air when they scent prey. The smell comes next, sharp as iron and musk, mixed with the faint sweetness of wild grass crushed under their weight. And when they strike, it is not chaotic. Each body knows its place, the way a river knows its bed. Some drive prey forward, others circle to cut off escape, and the strongest seize the flanks or throat. In that moment, the pack is a single living force, as seamless as breath. People watching from ridges or hiding near campfires could not fail to feel both fear and awe. Here was an enemy and a teacher. If the direwolves succeeded, it meant fewer bison or elk for hunters to take, yet their method revealed a pattern that humans themselves could copy. In whispered councils, some no doubt spoke of the direwolf as a rival spirit, a guardian of secrets. Cave paintings never captured them with the detail given to bison or mammoth, yet bones tell us they were present, woven into the background of human struggle. And in stories that have carried across centuries, wolves have always walked beside us as symbols of hunger and kinship, danger and protection. The direwolf, larger and fiercer, must have held that place even more deeply. Maintaining a pack was no easy matter. Hunger pressed at the edges every day. Too few kills and loyalty frayed, too many mouths and the weakest starved. It was balance, precarious and constant. Mothers guarded pups fiercely, curling their bodies around them so the warmth of milk and fur could keep out the sting of snow. Older wolves taught the young with games that were not games at all. Mock hunts, chases through brush, tussles that built the strength and reflexes they would need. Even discipline had a place. A snarl, a nip, a firm push to remind each member where they stood in the invisible order of the pack. But the heart of it lay not only in hierarchy or survival. It was in the bond itself. Imagine lying in the dark of a winter den, the press of warm bodies against your sides, the steady rhythm of breath rising and falling in unison. Smell the dense musk of fur, the faint copper tang of old blood still clinging to their muzzles. Hear the soft whimpers of pups dreaming, the low rumble of adults keeping watch. That closeness was its own shield against the vast emptiness of the world outside. Alone, a direwolf was strong but doomed. Together, they were enduring. Humans must have felt the echo of this truth in their own gatherings. Around fires, with the scent of smoke and cooked meat in their noses, they would tell stories of beasts that walked together through the dark. Children would lean close, listening, while sparks rose into the night like 100 fleeting stars. To them, the direwolf was more than an animal. It was a lesson etched into the earth itself. Survival meant togetherness, sacrifice, the sharing of risk and reward. And yet, the direwolf story is also one of change. As the ice retreated and the climate shifted, the prey animals grew smaller, swifter. The mammoths and giant bison faded, leaving behind deer and antelope, nimble creatures that required different strategies. Gray wolves adapted, lighter and quicker, less dependent on sheer strength and more on versatility. Direwolves, bound to the old ways, struggled. Their packs, once their greatest strength, became a weight when food grew scarce. For the first time, the pack could no longer guarantee survival. Still, memory is stubborn. Even after their extinction, echoes of them remain. In myth and in name, the direwolf lingers. To some, they became spirits of the underworld, haunting guardians at the edge of life and death. To others, they were ancestors of the wolves that still roam today, a shadow that shaped the way humans look at every yellow-eyed predator slinking through the trees. In folktales, the pack becomes a symbol of loyalty that endures even when the world changes, of courage found in numbers, of the thin line between kinship and hunger. When you close your eyes and imagine standing in that world, you can almost taste the air itself, sharp, mineral cold, with the faint bite of ash from some distant fire carried on the wind. Your skin prickles with the weight of watching eyes you cannot see. Somewhere, just beyond the reach of light, the pack moves. You hear their paws whispering against snow, the soft pant of breath carried like a secret through the night. You know they could be upon you in heartbeats, yet you also feel the pull of belonging, the deep, almost aching recognition that they too are bound by rules not unlike your own. And this is perhaps why the story endures. To speak of direwolves is not only to recall a creature of the past, but to hold a mirror to ourselves. How do we form our packs, keep them, protect them against the winters of our own lives? How do we tend to the wounded among us? How do we balance hunger and loyalty, freedom and belonging? The direwolf asks these questions even now, long after their voices have gone silent. If you listen closely, in the hush of an autumn forest or the empty stretch of a prairie night, you may still hear the faintest trace of their chorus. It will not sound like the gray wolf's lonely cry, but something deeper, layered, as if many voices moved as one. It rises in your chest, rattling bone, pulling something ancient awake. For a moment, you are back there, standing where your ancestors once stood, caught between fear and wonder, listening to a pack whose bond outlasted the cold and the dark, whose memory still runs in the marrow of the earth itself. Why did the direwolf hunt the way it did? That question lingers like a half-remembered dream, echoing across the long corridors of time. We can imagine them now, moving through a frozen plain more than 10,000 years ago, their heavy paws pressing into snow that crackled like old paper under weight. Shadows among shadows, their bodies sliding between bare trees, breaths rising like smoke in the bitter air. Theirs was a world of hunger and cold, where survival meant not only strength but coordination, patience, and an uncanny rhythm of movement that could bring down beasts far larger than themselves. The direwolf, Canis dirus, was not a creature of fantasy, not some invented monster to haunt fireside tales, but a flesh-and-blood predator. Larger than the gray wolves that still roam our forests today, their jaws were wider, their bite deeper, their skull built for crushing bone. Yet sheer power was not enough to keep them alive in the harsh climates of the Pleistocene. What made them thrive, for a time, was not only their size but their ability to think and act together. They hunted in packs. But how exactly did a pack of direwolves orchestrate the dance of the hunt? Imagine it, a herd of bison, their shoulders rolling like dark waves across the steppe. The direwolves watch from the ridgeline, amber eyes glittering in twilight. The air is full of smells, damp earth thawing beneath snow, the musk of shaggy coats, the sharp scent of fear already trickling from the herd. The wolves move silently, and though there may be 20 of them, they give the impression of one single being with many limbs. No lone predator could hope to bring down a bison, yet together they become something greater than themselves, a chorus of muscle and instinct. To see them hunt would have been both terrifying and strangely beautiful. They worked in arcs and sweeps, flowing like water around their prey. Some would rush forward, not to strike, but to test, to provoke, to scatter. Others held back, circling, waiting for the weak or the young to falter. Their strategy was patience. The chase was not a blind sprint, but a slow tightening of invisible threads until the chosen victim was cut away from safety. Then came the charge, a thunder of paws, a chorus of snarls, the air filled with the metallic taste of blood before the kill had even been made. Humans watched all this with wary respect. For early people who shared the land with direwolves, the lessons were clear. To survive, one must be more than strong. One must move as a group. One must read signals in the body language of companions, anticipate without words, know when to rush forward and when to hold back. The pack was a mirror to the tribe. Around firelight, our ancestors told stories of these hunts, not only to warn each other of the wolves' danger, but to learn from their brilliance. In some myths, the direwolf was more than an animal. It was a spirit of cooperation, a shadow that reminded humans that survival was always shared. Practical responses grew out of this respect. Hunters knew to avoid leaving stragglers when traveling across open land. They taught their children to recognize the signs of wolves preparing to strike. The sudden silence, the split in the herd, the flash of teeth in the dark. They carried fire, kept close together, sang loudly into the night to suggest strength they did not always feel. For in the eyes of the direwolf, humans too were prey. Strange prey, clever, but prey nonetheless. Picture yourself there. The bite of frost on your cheeks, the sound of your own heart drumming too fast in your chest as shapes flicker at the edge of firelight. You smell the resin of burning pine, the tang of smoke on your tongue. Behind you, children sleep, and you cannot afford to falter. The wolves move just beyond the glow, their eyes like lanterns swaying in rhythm. They do not attack yet, they test. They measure your resolve the same way they measure a bison's. Do you hold the line, or do you scatter? In that test lay the difference between survival and loss. Over generations, humans wove the direwolf into symbols. Some saw them as guardians of the dead, guiding souls across snowy plains. Others feared them as omens of famine, for where wolves hunted, hunger reigned. Still, there was admiration too. Carvings on bones, paintings deep in caves show the wolf not only as enemy but as kin, as teacher. In the dark, one could almost believe that humans and wolves learned the art of the hunt together. The psychology of the direwolf hunt is no less fascinating than the physical act. To work as one, each wolf had to know its place, to trust its companions. There must have been subtle signals, an ear flick, a shift in posture, a ripple of breath, that spoke louder than sound. Imagine the tension of waiting, the muscles quivering, the senses sharpened to a point. The snow crunches beneath the herd. You can almost taste the dust rising from the ground, gritty and dry on the tongue. The wolves hold, until the moment cracks, and they rush forward like a storm breaking loose. The thrill of pursuit must have surged through their veins, a fierce music older than language. When the kill was made, the experience bound them tighter. The smell of blood steaming against winter air, the rough scrape of tongues against torn hide, the warmth of life fading into meat. They shared, not always equally, but enough to keep the group intact. For a pack that fractured too deeply would not last long in a land that demanded unity. Even the carcass left behind had meaning. Humans who came across the remains of a direwolf kill could read the story in the bones. The way ribs had been cracked for marrow, the way heavy jaws left grooves on femurs, the drag marks in the dirt where prey had struggled. To some, it was a warning, to others a guide. Here is how they hunt. Here is how they win. And yet, for all their power, direwolves vanished. When the great megafauna fell, mammoths, mastodons, the giant bison, the direwolves too lost their footing. Their very specialization, the strength of their jaws, the size of their bodies, became their weakness. They were built for prey that no longer existed. Humans, with our spears and arrows, were not so easily caught, and smaller game could not sustain such heavy hunters. Slowly, the chorus of direwolf howls faded from the world. But the echoes remain. In the gray wolf that survives today, in the dogs that curl beside our fires, in the stories we whisper of loyalty and cunning and danger. When we speak of brotherhood, of working side by side, of sharing not only food but purpose, we are speaking, in part, of the direwolf. Their pack hunting tactics were more than survival strategies. They were lessons written in snow and blood, lessons our ancestors carried into their own hunts, into their own bonds. Think again of that frozen plain. The night is vast, the stars sharp as ice chips overhead. The herd shifts uneasily, hooves striking against frozen ground. The wolves are moving now, low and silent, tails flicking in time. There is a pulse to it, a rhythm you can almost hear if you close your eyes. Pat of paw, snort of prey, the creak of ice, the whisper of wind. Then the sudden break, the rush, the thunder, the cries torn from lungs. For a moment, all the world is movement and sound, and then silence falls again, heavy, absolute. Even now, when we watch modern wolves on a hunt, we glimpse that ancient memory. The way they circle, the way they flank, the way they close in without words. It is the same music, only quieter, played by a smaller band. And within us, too, it lingers. For are we not also pack hunters at heart? We gather in groups, plan our moves, rely on one another to survive. The direwolf may be gone, but its tactics echo in our very bones. The smell of pine smoke drifts in memory, the cold air nips at skin, the taste of fear mingles with the taste of fire-warmed food. The world holds its breath as the great predators move, and though we may never hear their howls again, the story of how they hunted still runs beneath our feet, like a buried river, shaping the way we see strength, the way we understand the bond between many and one. What does it mean for a creature to vanish from the earth, not merely to die, but to be erased as a living presence? That is the question that lingers whenever one thinks of the direwolf. For ages, their heavy paws pressed against the soil of the Americas, their eyes gleamed in the glow of ancient moons, and their voices, deep, thunderous howls, rolled across valleys and frozen plains. Then, in what seems a blink measured against the patience of stone and mountain, they were gone. Yet gone does not always mean forgotten, for the memory of their teeth, their shadows, their legends still lingers. The legacy of the direwolf is stitched into the fabric of human imagination as tightly as it once was into the sinews of the hunt. Picture them first not in death, but in life. Their coats thick and coarse, rich with the musk of animal warmth. The frost clinging to their fur as they padded along riverbanks, the crunch of ice beneath their weight. Stronger and more robust than the gray wolf we know today, yet not grotesque, rather, a more formidable echo of the familiar. Their jaws, wide and unforgiving, carried the power to crush bone, to split marrow. And marrow was life. To taste it was to survive the endless winters of the Ice Age. Now imagine, in that same chill air, the smell of smoke from human fires drifting across the wind. Small bands of people, hunters clothed in hides, faces drawn tight against the cold, watched those wolves. Not as distant curiosities, but as rivals, as teachers, sometimes as symbols. The direwolf's hunger mirrored their own. Both species sought the same prey, the bison, the horse, the mammoth calves, the deer that bounded through the snowy forest. Sometimes man and direwolf clashed in this pursuit, and sometimes, perhaps, they watched each other with a kind of wary recognition. In the crackle of firelight, ancient storytellers surely spoke of them. The shape looming in the darkness, too large to be just another wolf, too fierce to be ignored. In those stories, direwolves might have been monsters, guardians, or omens. We will never know the exact words, yet it is easy to imagine the rhythm of their voices, the sway of shadows on cave walls, the weight of a child's breath held tight at the moment the storyteller's hand carved the outline of a massive paw into the dirt. The extinction of the direwolf was not sudden. It was a slow unraveling, like a rope fraying over years of strain. The Ice Age ended, and with it, the world shifted. The land warmed, forests spread, and the great herds of enormous prey began to vanish. For creatures built to tear into thick hides and feast on heavy bones, this change was devastating. Their strength became their weakness. What had been an advantage against the monstrous beasts of the Pleistocene became a burden when the world shrank to swifter deer and smaller game. Gray wolves, more adaptable, could turn their hunger to almost anything. The direwolf, bound by the weight of its own design, could not. There is tragedy in that, but also inevitability. One can feel it even in the bones left behind, scattered across the La Brea tar pits in California. Thousands of direwolf remains lie trapped there, drawn into the black pools where they perished while struggling after doomed prey. Close your eyes and listen to the scene. The shrill cries of a trapped herbivore echoing across the sticky pit, the thunder of paws as direwolves rush in, their heavy breaths mixing with the bitter stench of tar. Then silence, except for the slow bubbling of the earth reclaiming them. That smell, sharp, chemical, almost burnt, would have seared itself into the nose of any who stood too close. Death was thick in that air, and yet, to look at those bones today is not to smell tar, but the dry dust of museums. They rest behind glass, clean and catalogued, their jagged teeth frozen in perpetual snarl. Visitors lean in close, pressing fingertips against cold barriers, whispering in awe at creatures they will never meet. Children widen their eyes at the sheer size of the skulls. Some feel a faint shiver, as though those ancient eyes are still watching, still waiting. In a way, they are. The direwolf has not left us completely. It lingers in our stories, in our language, even in the rhythm of our fears. For centuries after their disappearance, echoes of the direwolf remained in cultural memory. In the myths of North and South America, in whispered tales of monstrous wolves, in European legends carried across the sea, perhaps embroidered by memory of travelers' tales, the direwolf became less of an animal and more of a symbol, of wilderness unbroken, of predators too large to tame, of the wild heart itself. Later, in the imaginations of writers, they would be given thrones and crowns, woven into sagas not as extinct beasts, but as enduring archetypes of loyalty and ferocity. One might taste the legacy of the direwolf in a different way, too, not on the tongue, but in the imagination of hunger. To think of what it was like to sit in darkness, stomach empty, and hear that bone-deep howl across the plain. The sound would have rolled through the night like thunder, a reminder that other mouths sought the same sustenance, that survival was not yours alone to claim. The howl was not merely sound. It was vibration in the ribs, it was fear prickling the skin, it was the sudden metallic taste of adrenaline at the back of the throat. Psychologists today speak of the way predators shaped the human mind. We are storytellers because we were hunted as often as we hunted. The direwolf played its part in carving that instinct. The watchfulness in our eyes, the way we scan the dark woods, the dread we feel at a low growl, these are fossils of experience carried not in bone, but in blood. But extinction has a curious way of changing meaning. When alive, the direwolf was fear and competition. Dead, it became memory and symbol. The loss itself holds weight. We look back now and see in its disappearance not merely a predator vanishing, but a reminder of fragility. Species can fall away. Power is no shield. Even the mightiest jaw cannot bite forever against the turning of the world. Still, we long for them. There is something deeply human about imagining their return. We dress them in the trappings of fantasy, giving them glowing eyes, shaggy manes, impossible size. We carve them into statues, paint them on banners, dream them into stories where they stride once again beside us. It is as if we are unwilling to let them go entirely. Their extinction, in a strange way, amplified their immortality in the human heart. And perhaps that is the true legacy, not that they once hunted across the continent, but that their absence continues to haunt us. We walk forests where they no longer roam and feel the silence pressing at our ears. We read of their bones in tar and ash, and imagine the weight of their gaze behind us. We give them new life in words, because words are what humans use to resist forgetting. If you close your eyes, you can still place yourself there, the campfire dwindling, sparks rising into the night, the smell of smoke and roasted meat still clinging to the air. You hear a crack in the woods, a slow tread, a rustle of breath too deep for the wind. The hairs along your arms rise. The night is no longer empty. Something vast, heavy, unseen but near, passes just beyond the reach of firelight. For a moment, you taste fear, metallic, sharp, filling the mouth like blood. Then it is gone. What remains is the story. The direwolf teaches us that extinction is not silence. It is transformation. From flesh into bone, from bone into dust, from dust into memory, and from memory into myth. In that chain, something eternal is forged. They are not here, yet they are here in every tale, in every echo of the hunt, in every quiet fear of the wilderness we still carry inside. Their howls may no longer ripple across the valleys, but the world has not forgotten the sound. The question remains, was it fate or was it accident? Was the direwolf always destined to vanish when the ice receded, or could it have endured if the world had been a little differently? No one can answer with certainty, and maybe that is part of the fascination. Extinction leaves not only absence, but mystery. In the silence left behind, imagination grows, weaving possibilities as endless as the night sky. So the story continues, not in the ground where their bones lie, but in the minds that keep shaping their image. Each retelling, each whisper, each symbol scratched into a page or spoken at a fire, breathes them back for a moment. And perhaps that is what matters most. The direwolf lives on, not in the flesh, but in the way we remember to ask, what does it mean for something so mighty to disappear and yet to remain? Why do some creatures choose one stretch of earth over another? Why would a direwolf, with all its power and hunger, tread miles of frozen forest to circle back to the same valley, the same ridge, the same shadowed clearing? Was it instinct alone, or was there something more, some bond between beast and ground, as if the land itself whispered to them where to linger, where to hunt, where to make their stand? Picture the ancient world as it was. The Pleistocene age, when glaciers carved rivers of ice and winds rushed unhindered across plains that seemed endless. The nights were darker then, the stars sharper, the air colder and heavy with scents no longer familiar to us. Smoke from peat fires, musk of mammoth, the sharp tang of snow on bare rock. In that landscape walked the direwolf, larger than any wolf alive today, bone-crushing jaws carrying the promise of survival for the pack. But survival was not random. It was tied to place. The chosen grounds were not just feeding spots. They were maps written in memory and blood. Hunters have always known this, whether they carried stone-tipped spears or rifles made of steel. Even today, a hunter knows where the deer come down to drink, where elk gather in the rut, where mountain lions wait for shadows. The direwolves knew this in their bones. They read the land as easily as we read stories, tracing lines of scent, listening to the movement of hooves in the dark. A direwolf pack might linger near a river bend where herds of bison crossed. The ground there was churned to mud, sweet with the smell of dung and trampled grass. You could hear it before you saw it. The shuffle of hooves, the low moan of animals too many to count, the soft splash of water disturbed by bodies. To the direwolves, that place was as good as a granary is to a farmer. But they could not linger without risk. Other predators knew the river bend too, the great cats, the bears. The chosen grounds were never peaceful. They were contested. To hunt there was to risk battle, not just with prey but with rivals. Humans, too, learned the patterns. Our ancestors watched the direwolves from a distance, shivering in hides by the firelight, their bellies hollow. They marked which valleys drew the predators. If a pack of direwolves haunted a stretch of forest, it meant game was near. But it also meant danger, for no man armed only with a sharpened stick wanted to be caught on the same trail as those beasts. In stories passed by fireside, people spoke of wolves as spirits bound to the land, guardians of thresholds. Crossing into their chosen grounds was like stepping into sacred space, a place where rules were different and trespass had a price. One can imagine how the ground itself must have felt beneath the paws of a direwolf. Thick pads pressed into snow, into frozen earth, into mud slick with blood after a kill. To touch that earth was to know where the hunt had ended before. Scents clung to soil and rock. The copper tang of spilled life did not wash away easily. Even today, when we walk places where battles were fought or animals once gathered in great numbers, we sometimes feel a heaviness, as if the air remembers. For the direwolves, choosing hunting grounds was not only about food. It was about strategy. They needed space wide enough for a coordinated chase, cover to mask their movements, a funneling point where prey would be slowed, ravines, icy slopes, rivers with steep banks. They chose places where the odds tilted just slightly in their favor. Picture them standing silent on a ridgeline at dusk, the cold wind flattening their fur, eyes glowing with reflected starlight. They watch the valley below, the herd moving like a dark tide. They know this valley. Their ancestors hunted here. Bones of past victories lie beneath the soil, hidden under layers of grass and moss. And yet, there was always the pull between abundance and risk. A ground too rich in prey would also be rich in competitors. A ground too empty would starve the pack. They balanced these truths as surely as any human hunter weighing whether to stalk the herd or turn back to camp. That balance is something timeless. It echoes in every hunter who has ever stepped into the wild, heart racing, trying to listen not just with ears but with skin, with breath, with intuition. To speak of senses is to imagine what it was like in the presence of direwolves. The sight first, massive forms in twilight, their outlines heavier than modern wolves, shoulders thick, jaws broader. You would not forget such a sight once you'd glimpsed it, the way they moved, both patient and electric, like shadows waiting to strike lightning. Then sound, their pads crunching softly in snow, the sudden explosive barking howl that gathered the pack, the pounding chaos of hooves as prey fled. Touch came next, the ground trembling with the stampede of terrified beasts, air pushed against your skin by the rush of movement. Smell, rich, musky, almost overwhelming, fur damp with snowmelt, sweat of prey, iron of blood. And taste, strange as it may sound, lingered too. If you were human, chewing on dried meat by your fire, the tang of smoke mixing with the flavor of survival, knowing somewhere out there, direwolves tasted the same but fresher, rawer, hot from the body of the fallen. Over generations, people wove meaning into these hunting grounds. A valley where wolves gathered was not just a valley. It was a threshold, a border. Some believed the spirits of the dead walked there, led by wolves into the afterlife. Others saw in the direwolf a teacher, showing humans how to hunt in packs, how to work together, how to claim the strength of the group over the weakness of the lone. The chosen grounds became symbols of unity and danger, life and death entangled. Think of the psychology of those who lived then. Fear and awe must have mingled in equal measure. To walk through a forest and find paw prints larger than your own hand pressed into mud, that was both a warning and a reminder that you were never the greatest hunter. To hear howls echoing at night across frozen plains was to feel the hair rise on your neck, yet also to feel less alone, part of a world still throbbing with life. The direwolves chose their grounds, and humans, in turn, chose stories to explain why. Some stories said the wolves returned to certain places because the land itself fed them, spirits of rivers and mountains guiding them back. Others said they were cursed to wander old battlefields, feeding on the restless dead. Still others believed the direwolves chose grounds that matched their own hearts, wild, merciless, untamed. And in each telling, humans found lessons for themselves: where to travel, where to avoid, how to respect the balance between hunger and danger. Archaeologists today still find traces of these patterns. Bones of direwolves mingled with the bones of bison and horses at the La Brea tar pits in California, where animals came for water and became trapped. That place was chosen again and again, though not with foresight. Prey lured hunters, hunters lured rivals, and all sank together into the dark. The tar preserved their struggle, a grim record of choices made in pursuit of survival. Even now, when you stand near those pits, the air carries a faint petroleum smell, sharp and almost sweet. Imagine it mixed with the stench of decay thousands of years ago, and you can sense why the direwolves would not resist the pull. The hunting ground was both gift and trap, feast and grave. When we walk the earth today, it is easy to think the direwolves are gone, their choices erased. Yet echoes remain. Wolves still favor valleys where elk descend in winter, still track rivers where deer drink at dusk. Farmers still tell tales of livestock taken near old paths that predators have followed for generations. We too return to the same places, fishing spots, berry patches, hidden glades. Perhaps it is less choice than memory of the land itself guiding us back, the same way it guided the direwolves. If you listen on a cold night, when the wind rattles through trees and the stars burn sharp above, you might catch yourself imagining it. The ground beneath your feet, chosen long ago by creatures now lost. Somewhere in the silence, the memory of their paws still presses the earth. Somewhere, the echo of their hunt still stirs the air, reminding us that all living things are bound to place, and that no hunt, no story, no life is ever entirely separate from the ground on which it stands. Have you ever wondered what it was like to stand in the shadows of an ancient world, when the air itself seemed heavier with mystery, when the beasts that roamed were not yet written into the fragile paper of our histories? Imagine the land tens of thousands of years ago, untouched by the roads, the fences, the hum of cities. It was raw earth, breathing with wind and fire, forests thick with the scent of pine and damp soil, rivers swollen with the melt of glacial ice. And there, woven into the fabric of that world, walked a creature whose name still makes the imagination stir, the direwolf. Picture yourself kneeling in the snow at dusk, the horizon burning faintly with the last embers of a winter sun. The silence is immense, broken only by the crunch of ice beneath your boots and the faint rush of your own breath. From far off, a sound rises, a deep, rolling howl, more guttural than any wolf you have ever heard. It carries across the frozen plain, shaking something deep in your chest, awakening both fear and wonder. That was the voice of the direwolf, the ancient predator that lived and died beside our ancestors. The problem, or perhaps the mystery, begins here. What exactly was this beast? Scientists tell us the direwolf, Canis dirus, was larger and heavier than the gray wolves we know today, with jaws strong enough to crack bone and teeth designed to crush through the densest hide. Fossils whisper of their power, skulls unearthed from tar pits, their bones stained black by ages of entrapment. Yet numbers and measurements cannot capture the full weight of what it meant to live alongside them. To our ancestors, direwolves were not simply animals. They were forces of nature, woven into stories and survival alike. Imagine a small band of hunters, tens of thousands of years ago, huddled around a fire beneath a canopy of stars. The flames pop and spark, the air sharp with the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat. Every sense is heightened, because they know they are not alone. Just beyond the flickering circle of firelight, shapes move in the dark. Eyes gleam yellow, then vanish. The direwolves are there, patient, waiting for a chance to strike or scavenge. For the humans, every meal is a gamble. Hunt too little, and they starve. hunt too much, and the direwolves will come, drawn by the smell of blood. Survival was never just about strength. It was about balance, about listening to the forest, about sensing the rhythm of predators and prey. People learned to read the land, to know the difference between the sound of snow shifting under its own weight and the sound of paws pressing into it. They could smell when something large had passed nearby. Fur and musk mingled with the faint rot of old kills. Their ears tuned to the layered chorus of night, owls, foxes, wolves, and somewhere deeper, that long, bone-deep howl of the direwolf. The response was practical: larger fires, sharpened spears, vigilance through the long hours of darkness. Yet practicality soon blurred into ritual. Fires were fed not just with wood, but with prayers. Spears were carried not just as tools, but as symbols of courage. Fear, when named and honored, became strength. It is here that imagination began to stitch itself into the seams of daily life. To see a direwolf in the pale light of dawn, its fur bristling with frost, its breath steaming in great clouds, was to see a creature both real and otherworldly. The people gave it meaning beyond flesh. Some clans spoke of the direwolf as a guardian spirit, fierce but fair, testing those who wandered too far from safety. Others whispered of it as a shadow of death, a hunter that followed the souls of the fallen into the next world. Its growl was thunder, its eyes were lanterns, its teeth the edge of winter itself. In stories told around the fire, children were warned, stray too far, and the direwolf will find you. And yet, those same stories carried respect. For though the direwolf was feared, it was also honored, as all powerful things were. Now close your eyes and imagine standing in their world. The taste of smoke clings to your tongue. Your skin feels the warmth of the fire on one side and the icy bite of wind on the other. You hear a crack in the forest, a rustle, then silence so deep it presses against your ears. In that silence, your mind plays tricks. You picture the direwolf before it even appears, broad shoulders, thick fur, eyes like molten amber watching you from the treeline. The fear you feel is ancient, older than words. It is the fear of being prey, of knowing another being sees you not as person but as flesh, as warmth, as sustenance. That fear is not weakness. It is survival written into the marrow of our bones. As centuries passed, people found ways to carry that fear into meaning. Skins of wolves were worn not just for warmth but for power. Teeth and claws became talismans. In some traditions, young hunters fasted and kept vigil in the wilderness, listening for the direwolf's call, believing it could guide them into adulthood, to where the mark of the wolf was to say, "I have walked to the edge of death and returned." It was a language of courage, woven from encounters too close to forget. Yet there was another layer, softer and more mysterious. To live in a world shared with direwolves was to live with mirrors. Humans hunted in groups, communicated with signals, cared for their young as a unit. Direwolves did the same. They moved in packs, coordinated their strikes, defended their kin. The parallels were impossible to ignore. In the glint of their eyes, in the synchronized rush of their hunt, people saw something of themselves. Predator and predator, each testing the other, each learning from the other. Perhaps this is why their presence lingered so strongly in story, long after the species vanished. They were not just beasts of tooth and claw. They were reflections of our own hungers, our own bonds, our own need to belong. But time does not stand still. The ice began to retreat, the great mammoths dwindled, the megafauna vanished one by one. The direwolf, mighty though it was, could not outlast the shift. Without its favored prey, it struggled, and slowly, the forests and plains grew quieter of its howls. The last direwolf lived over 10,000 years ago, but in truth, they never left. They remain in the echo of legends, in the bones pulled from tar and soil, in the stories that still ripple through our imaginations. Even now, if you step into the stillness of a winter forest, you can feel them. The crunch of snow underfoot, the sting of cold on your skin, the distant cry of a wolf carried on the wind. It stirs something older than memory. You are connected to those who once sat at fires, to those who feared and revered the direwolf. Their world is not gone. It lives in your senses, in your instincts, in the shiver that climbs your spine when you hear a howl in the night. Think of the way cultures today still paint wolves as symbols of strength, loyalty, wildness. Think of the stories that place wolves at the threshold between this world and another. These are not inventions from nothing. They are echoes, the long shadow of the direwolf reaching forward through time. The beast may have vanished, but its spirit endures, woven into our art, our language, even our dreams. Picture yourself, one last time, on that ancient plain. The fire crackles low. The stars stretch endless overhead, sharper than you've ever seen them. You breathe in the scent of earth, of pine, of smoke and frost. Beyond the circle of light, a shape moves, broad, silent, inevitable. You cannot see it fully, but you know it's there. You feel the weight of its gaze, the presence of something vast and enduring. You do not run. You do not shout. You simply sit, and in that moment, you understand. The direwolf was never just a predator. It was a reminder that the world is larger, darker, more alive than we can ever hold in words. And as the silence stretches, as the night deepens, as your heart beats in steady rhythm with the unseen steps of the wild, you realize that this story has never ended at all. It lives on, in every breath of wind, in every echo of a howl, in the ancient memory that still sleeps inside us.